Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Preds Power Hour here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ, over there in Miami, Ohio. Jeff Middleton of Flames Nation is here. Jeff, good evening, sir. How are you?
Doing well. It's been a hot minute since we've had one of these, so I'm doing well. I'm excited to be back.
Hey, and folks, we're taping this on a Tuesday night. Preds are currently playing against the Canucks, but look, a lot of hockey going on, and we make the time when we can. So we're not going to talk about the Canucks when folks are listening to this on Wednesday morning. You're not going to get Canucks Preds coverage here. But look, there's a lot of games, and there will be more games for us to talk about. But we can talk about the first 8 here, and it's a nice round, even number, like the first 8 games for the Preds, which is kind of crazy that the NHL season's already almost 10 games in for most teams, and unfortunately for Jeff Middleton, the Boston Bruins, big fans of this very show, listened to their supposed demise, and were like, "Not so fast, my friend. That it's not happening on our watch." Thanks for the motivation.
Yeah, they set out to prove me wrong. They look really good early, so we'll see how that goes for the rest of the year.
We shall. But don't forget, folks, if you're watching us on YouTube, first, thank you. Hit that subscribe button, like button, and all that good stuff. Comment below, youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. As we're over 1.4 thousand subs on the YouTube channel. Keep helping us grow that each and every day. You can also listen to us each and every week on this very show. So if you're a Nashville Predators fan and this is your first time checking out the podcast, thank you for checking out today's episode of the program. We do this each and every week on Tuesday nights, generally speaking. So look out for that on your podcast player feed with Bryan Bastin, who will be here in a little bit, along with Jeff Middleton. So some of the best Preds conversation and coverage each and every week here on the Chase Thomas Podcast. You can email us at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. And you can also find us anywhere you get your podcast apps, and leave us a 5-star rating and write us a review on why you like Preds Power Hour on this very show each and every week. Jeff, first thing I want to ask you, who is to blame? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Scoring issues for the Preds. Who is to blame in your estimation for Nashville's scoring issues, and do you think it can be fixed with the current roster?
Well, I'm not sure that there's anyone like individually I would blame. I mean, I think that, we've kind of seen this Andrew Brunette system kind of take its toll on the Preds. Toll is probably the wrong word there, but they, looking at the heat maps on the first 8 games, you can kind of see a trend, and that's that, over the last few years, we've seen a Peter Laviolette system that emphasized shots from the point, that emphasized, bodies in front, primarily defense in counterattacks, which worked to varying degrees of success. And then John Hines was kind of the same thing. Not a lot of offense even being generated in that system. Whereas now Andrew Brunette is focusing on, moving the puck through the middle of the ice, pushing it out wide, and then getting shots from every high danger area imaginable. There's so many shots from the slot. It's that's where the Preds are getting most of their goals from. And, they're 10th in expected goals for per 60 out of the entire NHL, but they're 28th in goals for per 60, which, that margin between what they're generating and what they're actually scoring is huge. It's, 18 spots worth of teams. Yeah, I'm not sure that there's anyone really, to blame. I would say that Philip Forsberg's not scoring as much as he probably should be. Early on this year, we've seen a lot of, high danger shots from him, a lot of stuff from the power play that he probably should score on. He's had the puck, so much that, everyone, it's hard to believe that he hasn't scored as much as he probably should. And then, of course, Roman Josi, he hasn't really scored other than the overtime winner last game. Ryan O'Reilly's kind of taken a step forward. You see, while these guys, while Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi haven't been scoring, you've seen kind of the guys like Ryan O'Reilly, and the big one is probably Colton Sissons, who they've taken this kind of step forward, and Colton Sissons, he has a goal tonight against the Canucks to tie the game at 1. They're winning 2-1 currently as we speak. Yeah, I mean, there's 3 guys with 4 goals: O'Reilly, Sissons, and Tommy Novak. He's been solid. But there's only 6 guys on the team with more than 2 goals. And, we haven't really seen a lot from Luke Evangelista in the goal scoring department. Gustav Nyquist, not expecting him to score a ton of goals, but he hasn't done that. Jakub Trenin hasn't gotten on the board yet. He doesn't even have a point, which is kind of nuts considering the kind of chances that he's generated. Cody Glass hasn't scored. He's hurt, which we'll talk about. And, probably the biggest one that I think of is Philip Tomasino. He hasn't lived up to what Andrew Brunette has needed him to be. So, while there are scoring problems, I would say, but I'm not sure that it's really about one person. I would say that Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi are the guys you look to score those goals that they're not getting. So if I were to name names, that would be who it is. But as those guys aren't scoring, there are other guys that have kind of stepped up in that department.
Do you think it's something that gets better as the season goes along, or do you think this is just something that Preds fans are going to have to get used to?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, I've talked about this before, but I think that the system, I don't think people really, I don't want to say understand it, but how these teams play is so much more important than the tangible results 9 games into the season. Obviously the tangible results are important, but you look at the Flames, right? The Flames are a mess. And it's not necessarily because of their system, but they're turning pucks over in the middle of the ice. They're making these errors. Their big name players aren't performing well at all. The analytics don't support the idea that their big time players are performing at a level that they should be. Whereas the Preds, they have these systems. I mean, and the Flames are like 2-6-1 now because of that. And the Preds, on the other hand, have these guys who are playing well. Most of their guys are playing well. Like I said, they're generating the 10th highest expected goals per 60 minutes in the entire NHL. They're just not, getting that back into the back of the net. So I think, I've written about this before. It's a lot of focusing more on the kind of the way that they play instead of how the results or how what's happening is happening on the ice. Andrew Brunette, like if this were a John Hines system, I'd say be concerned because sorry, because the way that they played in that system, there wasn't a lot of high danger chances being generated and there weren't a lot of goals being scored. That kind of matches up. If you're not getting the high danger chances, then you're not going to score. That's just kind of how the NHL game works. But with this Brunette system, you're seeing so many high danger chances and lots of high expected goal shots. The probability that the pucks are going to start going in is so much higher. So you have less to be worried about if you're worried about, Philip Forsberg not scoring goals or Roman Josi not scoring goals or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I think that 9 games is almost 2 handfuls, but it's still very early. There's 82 games to be played, and things are bound to happen over the course of a hockey season. And this system right now is showing that there's more to be seen from this team in terms of the goal scoring department.
What do you think happens when Schenn and Glass come back for this team?
That's actually an interesting question because, Chase as well as anybody. I'm not the biggest Luke Schenn fan in the world.
Tell me more. I'm not familiar with, if you're telling me you're not the biggest Luke Schenn fan, then you're going to have to explain to me who the biggest Evan Rodriguez fan on this very program is, because I feel like that's a name I've heard too.
Exactly. I think that, I think one of the funniest funniest. One of the most telling revelations from this season was the fact that Luke Schenn was, oh wow, oh boy. Apologies, everyone. We have a pirate that has invaded our podcast.
This podcast is rated R for Brian Bastin.
Howdy, guess where I just came from?
I mean, the possibilities are endless.
The mall.
Yeah, when you've got two girls and they say that you have to dress up for Halloween. Here we go.
Hey,
I don't even have the wig on.
Good dad, man. There you go.
There you go.
Look, that works. How are you seeing it? Wearing an eye patch, is it messing with your depth perception? Is it messing with
absolutely.
The yeah.
But funnily enough, I scratched my cornea over the weekend, so I was wearing it for necessity for a little bit. But
wait, is this not this is actually an issue? So you turned into a costume? Is that what's happening here?
Exactly. Yes, I did not have this any of this costume 24 hours ago.
Oh, I like it.
Repurposed. Some of it's from the women's section, but I want to hear more about Schenn and Glass there. Because I know that you're getting ready to say something really good about Luke Schenn, Jeff.
Yeah. You joined at the right time. We were just talking about me and my relationship to Luke Schenn on the Preds, and you and your relationship to Evan Rodriguez. So.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I heard that. I'm excited.
Anyway, so now that the gang is here, basically, what happens when they return? I would say, I think the most telling revelation of this season so far has been the decline that Luke Schenn plays one game and is then like considered to be the seventh defenseman. He was, it went from let's sign Luke Schenn to be the bodyguard for Roman Josi and then watch him get torched against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then they're like, I think this is not the right idea. Do you have makeup on under that eye, or is that
I do? I do, yeah. You gotta keep talking hockey, man.
Sorry. I'm getting distracted. I got a lot of sensory things happening right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that right now we're seeing Dante Fabro, kind of prove himself. I loved his game in preseason. I thought that he was one of the best defensemen on the Preds in preseason, if not the best defenseman on the Preds, or at least the most consistent. He has a goal tonight, which perfect segue into that. But he's looked really good, and I think that he's been able to kind of jump in and like seamlessly and play with Roman Josi on that top pair, and kind of bounce around if need be. He's a good defenseman, despite what some people might say. He's a good defenseman. I think that he's worth it long term instead of having Luke Schenn, having that experiment trying to force it to work. As for Cody Glass, I'd say that's the more interesting one, just because he hasn't necessarily looked bad. I haven't really found a reason to complain about him or to understand why anyone would complain about him. I thought he hasn't put up the amount of points that I think, or goals that I think a lot of people would expect him to at this point, but some of that's not his fault. Samuel Fagemo, he's looked solid with the Preds in the few games that he's played. Liam Foudy hasn't looked bad. He's only played a game, but he's I think that he deserves more of a shot than just a couple games. But I think the big name is once again Philip Tomasino. I think what they do with him is kind of the big question mark when Glass returns from injury, because there are a lot of guys that are playing better than Tomasino at this point, and I'd argue that you need to give Tomasino more of a chance, but I'm not an NHL coach. I'm not Andrew Brunette, so we'll just have to see what happens there. But I think that there's going to be some roster turnover. We'll see a couple guys moved down or moved out of the lineup. There's Michael McCarron's probably not going to get much playing time when Cody Glass comes back either. It'll be interesting to kind of see what the plan is there, because there are a lot of moving parts with different players and some depending on what guys need playing time at certain points. But so it'll be interesting. I think that the answer there would just be that there's going to be a fair amount of roster turnover, and some of it some fans might not be a huge fan of. But
Well, it seems like there's a disconnect, or maybe not a disconnect, but there is a lot of interest from Preds media where I'm listening to different shows and their perspective on it. And it seems like whether or not to wait on Phil Tomasino is a big question for this group. And if he's going to be able to get the time that you're talking about here to make it all work. And I just think, Bryan, wouldn't you say that he should have the time? Speaking of what Jeff's saying here, where it's like, what do you have to lose by letting him work out the kinks on the ice?
I would say that if you were asking this question last year, year before, anytime in the last 3 to 4 years, I might err more on the side of, he's had plenty of time, so on and so forth, that, maybe it's time to move on and give other guys a chance. But I'm going to be honest with you. What better time is there to take an extended look at one of your, former high round picks? I mean, again, this team has been super fun to watch, but I mean, they're 500 right now. I mean, even they're tied right now in the game. So,
speaking of, who had 500 before this year? We're almost there. And by almost, I mean like 6 months. But hey, we're off to a good start. If everyone remains healthy, this is a 500 Preds team. I'm feeling good about
Chase,
it.
I'm begging you not to talk about injury and healthiness, because Nashville has been very lucky looking at some of these other teams. But I mean, I think that Phil Tomasino, again, like, yes, I don't see reason to panic over a healthy scratch or two, especially this early in the season. They're still trying to figure things out. I mean, again, this is, Andrew Brunette has he's got less than 10 for most of his players, 10 games to look at and to evaluate. Even us nerds, the stats boys, we don't usually start looking at those numbers until about 20 games, because, you can never tell. I mean, players go on 10, you look at, Philip Forsberg in February a few years back, like, yeah, having a hot streak of like 8 or 9 games or having a down streak of 9 or 10 games doesn't really define the season. And I don't think, you have Tomasino. He's still on a contract where he's waiver exempt. You give him some shots. You put him in the lineup against different teams with different line mates. They're doing plenty of shuffling. And if not, you spend him down to Milwaukee. I don't think there's much of a decision to be made as far as his future yet, because why? I mean, you've got time to evaluate. There's always the deadline if you're really serious about moving him, but there's nobody. I can't really say that there's even Luke Schenn. Like, I'd still put him back into the lineup for, he wouldn't be a consistent healthy scratch, because you got to know what you have and who's going to come in. Some of these guys might take a little longer, some might learn quick. So I think with Philip Tomasino, you give him a chance. He's been consistent. In what he's done so far. And if he makes it to the next level, fine. But Nashville doesn't need him to be a superstar right now. And that's okay.
I also think that, I don't think he's looked bad. I think that there's plays that, as much as I love my sweet analytics and my numbers and all my favorite, stats, I think there's things that, obviously that they don't pick up at this point in their development. And some of the stuff that Philip Tomasino has done just hasn't been, it's not able to be logged in an, expected goal category or I think that he's been really solid in transition. I think that his speed has played perfectly into this Brunette system. And I think that they need to look more into that. I think that he's been really solid, like in the battles along the wall. I think that, in a couple of the goals that the Preds have scored, that they've, they haven't, Philip Tomasino hasn't gotten an assist, but I think he's been a kind of a catalyst for that to even happen. Obviously you'd like to see him, generate more offense, expected goals, stuff like that. But I don't think that's all super characteristic of that's a characteristic of how he's played thus far. I think it might be a little over exaggerated, and I think that he needs to take a step forward on that offensive expected goal scoring potential category. But I don't think he's been like abysmal by any means.
I also wonder too. I mean, if he's not a first round pick in 2019, how is everyone viewing him right now? Like, if he's a 5th rounder, is he getting this much of a look? Is he getting this much of a benefit of the doubt? Like, how much is his draft position still a factor for both of y'all?
I would say for him, part of it is, you could say that having the first round, title, I guess, for himself, carries different expectations. But I've always kind of found that it's not quite as severe as it is when you're talking about a college football player coming out in the first round, something like that. There's because it takes time. You have to factor in that some guys don't start playing as early as Tomasino did. He's played for 2 different head coaches already. He was drafted by one that he didn't get to play for. But there's also the fact that his announcement, we found out that he was going to be playing a lot more, minutes in Nashville, in part just because he was planned on being the Kyle Turris replacement. That was kind of what was going on before the pandemic. And then when that happened, kind of everything got slowed down a little bit. But, so there is more expectation because, I know for a fact that John Hines was a huge Philip Tomasino fan. I mean, was from before he started coaching, he was a big fan of what his game had. And, this is a young kid. Again, he's drafted in 2019. He was born in 2001, which is just kills me. But this is a kid that's played for these 2 different head coaches. He's over 100 games in the NHL. And so yes, there is that pressure to start producing and stuff. But again, Nashville doesn't need him to be a world beater right now. If he can shore up his game defensively, if he can show that he can work both ends of the ice and be responsible, the scoring will come. I mean, the scoring's just now coming for this team, period. So patience, I think, is fine because there's not a rush on really anybody on this team.
Yeah, and I think that last year, we saw in his first year, he's 20 years old. At 20 years old, he played 76 NHL games and scored 32 points. He scored over 10 goals, and that was in 11 and a half minutes of ice time. And then last year, he had 15 and a half minutes of ice time and improved his scoring. He played only 31 games after he was sent inexplicably, in my opinion, to the NHL, or to the AHL, not to the NHL, to the AHL. Played well down there, kind of fought his way to get back up, which was, it was a little kind of frustrating for that process to take place. But he went from 32 points in 76 games to 18 points in 31 games. And then this year, he's back to 11 minutes and 41 seconds of average ice time, which, it's 9 games in. But still, I think that, at some point, I need to see him get an extended opportunity. And I don't think that he's done that just yet. I think that he has a lot of attributes that can be really useful in the system. And I think that, it's not that he hasn't been given a fair shake, because at some point the onus is on him to start, proving that he deserves a shot. But also, he didn't. At what point does 76 games and an improvement in scoring despite your line mates not being very good for most of those games, at what point does that come into play? Because it just doesn't feel like he's, it's not the benefit of the doubt that but it's more like he's, it's just, it takes a little extra for him, it feels like. And it's kind of what we saw for Eeli Tolvanen too. I'm going to bring it up now. I think that it sucks. And I'm worried that if he gets the Eeli Tolvanen treatment for whatever reason, that's going to be a problem. I think that's going to bite him in the butt. And that's hard to say, but we have to remember that he's still only 22 years old. I think anybody calling for his head at this point is overreacting. He's not 26. He's not 27. He's not even 25. He's 22 years old. He's barely legal drinking age. So let's just calm down and hopefully that he can get the opportunities that I think that he's deserved after his, performances over the last couple of seasons at his age.
Well, we'll leave it there. We'll see what happens. Tomasino, I feel like we're going to talk about him more and more as the season goes along. I think he'll be a subject of this very show for the remainder of this year and probably years to come. Bryan, winner from the last 2 weeks through 8 games in the Preds young season. Who has been the biggest winner for you?
Well, again, you know me, I always preach about sample size and having enough games to really kind of settle on a
no, throw it out. No sample size. We're throwing them out right now.
I'm going to say the big winner from the last 2 weeks is Andrew Brunette, man. I've seen it multiple times on Twitter throughout so far this season. That's like, I don't know what this team is going to do or whatever, but this team is fun, and it is fun. I mean, if you look at the lines from tonight against Vancouver, I mean, there's not a single like, I mean, even the third line of like Sissons and Trennan, like even that's not like a grinder, like check it out line. Like there's skill on every single line on that forward group, and that's just be still my beating heart, because that just rules. I mean, they're no longer a slow the game down, muddy everybody up. I mean, the defense has not quite come up yet, and the scoring took some time to get going. But if you're Andrew Brunette, you've got to feel pretty good about the way the fan base feels, the way that the players are taking these on. I mean, this isn't a team that is, they're losing games, but they're not losing every game the same way. There's lots to learn, and you can definitely tell there's a lot of growing pains. But I mean, except for the Edmonton game, most of them have been pretty fun to watch, and they've been pretty competitive. Part of that is UC Saros and things like that. But I mean, if you're Andrew Brunette, you got to be pretty happy with, he would never say that. He would never say that he was happy, after 10 games, but you got to be. I mean, shoot, if I'm Sean Henry, I think, I feel pretty good about the hire that you made.
I like it. On the negative side, though, Jeff, who has been the biggest loser through 8 games for the Preds?
That's kind of a tough one. There are a couple that come to mind. Phil Tomasino being one of them, I think. I think that's hard to avoid. I think,
you want to hear mine?
Yeah.
And I will include myself actually on this, but all the Cole Smith haters.
Oh,
this early in the season. Every time that you're starting to see less and less, every time Cole Smith pops up on the first line in practice, people, they're not quite as reacting the same way as they were. Now, granted, again, 2 goals, whatever, but he's played very well.
I think part of it's also the Cole Smith hate, I would say, didn't come from the fact that he was bad. I think I talked about that last year when it was happening, was like, he's a solid, like, 4th line guy. He can defend, and the numbers showed that. Like, I think that was, there wasn't
excellent on the penalty kill.
Yeah,
but we
exactly.
also do have to be honest with ourselves too, is that like we weren't especially praising his name either. I know we both did make the argument about he deserves a little better, but I want to be honest. I think that everybody in this city or out who's watching this, this team who's not named Cole Smith probably had lower expectations for him than what he may have had for himself. And I'm pretty glad to see him, thriving and doing pretty well. I mean, he's doing excellent on offense. Again, one of the best penalty killers on the team. There's nothing to complain about, really.
Yeah, and I think part of the hate also came from the fact that it felt like he could do no wrong. It was like a
a reverse Rocco Grimaldi.
Yeah, I think like there was a section of Predators, like, staff and media and even, some fans that were kind of like, he's what this team needs. He's like he's the guy. He's Dan Highnote. He's an 82-game player. He's everything you need. Like, at what point do we start acknowledging that he's, not this, incredible, fantastic, forward that can do everything, and he's just great everywhere. I mean, he took him like how long to score his first goal of the year? Like, I think that, like, at some point it gets old, and that's where it kind of came from, was like, there's so many big problems with that team last year, and instead of focusing on that or kind of, asking questions about that or like, it was all like, oh my God, Cole Smith, he's the greatest. He's just so good. He's kills penalties. He hits people. He's gritty. Like, I can't stand that. And, again, like I said, like, I think he was good. Like, for a 4th liner, for a 3rd or 4th line guy, I think he was perfectly capable last year. But the idea that he was like, one of the best players on the team, and should be higher in the lineup or whatever the case was. I just was like, okay, let's chill out a little bit.
But we can also say this to close this out: players that Cole Smith has played, players that he's played more games than them. Sorry, my English is bad, but Cole Smith has played in 77 games. That is more than Roman Josi, Matt Duchene, Tommy Novak, Philip Forsberg, Matthias Ekholm, Niederreiter, Tanner Jeannot, Ryan Johansson, Juuso Parson, and Alex Carrier, Mark Jankowski, Kiefer Sherwood, and so on and so forth. There's only 5 guys who have played more games than Cole Smith over the last 2 seasons. And you know what? Yes, we may not have always agreed to him being in the lineup at certain times, but he's done it, and that's more than 90% of the remainder of this team can say. So show up to work, do your job, and things tend to go okay. So props to Cole Smith. We were all, varying levels of wrong.
Hey, but that's a good thing. If you're a fan, hey, you want to be wrong about Cole Smith. You want to be wrong about stuff like this.
I don't want to be right. With something like that, I don't want to be right. No matter who it is, I don't want to be right.
I can name a couple players I wanted to be right about, but other than that, yeah.
Okay. I think there's Goliath now. Final thing we wrap up here on this week's edition of Preds Power Hour. Of course not, but maybe. I want to throw this out there for a segment idea for you guys. So, of course not, but maybe in regards to the Preds that you're thinking about, Bryan.
Okay.
Finish that sentence.
Let's see here. So I want to make sure I'm doing this right, Chase. So give me an example for one that you've done, so to make sure I get this right.
So of course not. Of course not. But maybe the Falcons are better off just never passing the football ever again. Maybe it's just Bijan and the Wildcat from here on out. One of those where you're they're not going to do this. But, this is something that I would like to see. This is something that I can't help but think about with this team.
Okay, all right. So let's see here. I've got a couple ideas. You know what? Okay, I'm gonna save one because I've got this one because this is one I've been pretty laughing about a little bit. Of course not. But maybe I might be turning around on the Gus Nyquist signing.
Ooh.
I might be turning around on the Gus Nyquist signing, and whatever I might have said positive before, it's not at the level at which I've felt pretty comfortable. How he's played so far. I mean, he's surprised me. My concerns so far. I mean, again, there's always room to grow, but yeah. I think maybe Gus might stick around. Maybe.
Okay. Jeff Middleton. Of course not, but maybe.
I don't know. This is a hard one. I mean, the easy ones, of course not, but maybe they don't play Luke Schenn for the rest of the year.
That's a good one for this segment, though. Of course, they're not going to do that, but maybe they should just not play Luke Schenn for the rest of the year.
But I mean, of course not. Tommy Novak scores 40 goals, but
yeah, I think one might be, of course not, but maybe they play Philip Tomasino on the first power play unit. I feel like that would be. I don't know. You want to give him an opportunity. There it is. If it doesn't work, okay. But man, that would be something. They're not going to do it for sure. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But just because of, that first power play unit is gelling really well, but I think it would be a fun experiment, especially if, you get into a part of the season and things aren't, again, like you said earlier, what do you have to lose? You want this guy to be given some opportunities. There you go. First power play unit, but yeah, those are the two that kind of popped into my head. Or maybe, of course not, but maybe they keep Dante Fabro in the lineup for the rest of the year.
That just ruined Bryan's night.
Yeah. He's got that goal. He's got a goal tonight.
Good, man.
He's got that goal. Good
got that goal in him.
He's got that goal. Oh, I like it. And I love this is the first Preds pod I think we've ever done where UC Saros did not make an appearance. Like we didn't. We just
I was
went
going to
34
say something, but I didn't.
Hey, but you know what? No, he earned his first day off of the season tonight. Let's not talk about him.
Yeah, he did.
No UC Saros in this program for once. So there you go. Maybe that means he's getting traded this week. Bryan Bastin, what can the good folks what can the good folks check out from you from on the forecheck.com this week?
Well, a couple of things you can look at. You can watch out. We'll have this 11-day road trip, so we'll be providing coverage for that. If something gets announced about somebody getting traded in the near future because of this podcast, I will be outside of Chase's house with flaming, and it's Halloween still, a spooky season. But yeah, just keep an eye out. The network, For Hockey Fans Network, has been really pushing everything. We've got everybody launched. The sites are looking much better and really great stuff. We had a roundtable talking about the old gambling scandal that we just had fairly recently with a 41 game ban, and so a handful of us from the different sites all weighed in on that. So that's more of the kind of thing you'll get to see, is some roundtables from everybody, people covering all over the league. So make sure you're giving them a follow, and of course back in the saddle with Charlie as I always am. So you'll see me Renegades a Puck. And and also probably not wearing a costume next time, but I can't make any promises.
And then Jeff, when you're not making your display name Luke Schenn on your FanDuel daily bets, what can the good folks check out from you across the internet this week?
Yeah, a lot of things. Lots of Flame stuff. They're kind of a hot mess, literally. Yeah. Like I said earlier in this podcast, they're not doing all that hot, literally, and so you can
do a whole article on this. You're just gonna find different ways to just fun.
Yeah, talking about that before the season with Jess Belmosto about it looked like it was two different ways that you can undergo a rebuild, and I think they're going two separate directions.
Yep, exactly. They're not looking great, and I think there's some big problems that they need to address. I think that they're not as bad as the results will show, but there's I think their analytics aren't they aren't like horrendous, but they still have some major problems. So just kind of looking at that, unfortunately watching some of their games, if they're not at 10 p.m. and finishing at 1 a.m. my time. Stuff for some Pinstripe Alley stuff here and there. Baseball off season, World Series is happening right now. And then some stuff for the Miami newspaper here about the hockey team, and little ranking of the NCHC hockey jerseys. So that'll be happening. Miami, go Red Hawks. Red Hawks are off to a
calling games
start.
now. You're doing all kinds of stuff.
If you haven't, listener, please tune in, because you'll get to hear the dulcet tones of Jeff, my boy. I say my boy as if I have any responsibility over this, but yeah, I mean, he's calling games now. Make sure you listen. I've gotten to catch about a period or so of a couple of them now, and you're killing it. I didn't want to tell you, but
thank you.
You're doing a good job.
So also, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but the Miami Red Hawks have a really nice hockey arena, and I'm just thinking here, I'm like, is it mean more in Maction country? Like, I don't understand why Miami's got a good hockey arena on campus. It's on campus, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I play intramural games there. It's super
it's better than the Gladiators, folks. By the way, who's an ECH team, and I've been to many of those games, and I was like, oh, this is
I know.
Nice.
It's time for you to get back in on your scouting game and get out there. We've got that's part of our.
I'll be there
that's
in
a third
December.
of our
I'm
coverage
going.
Now,
I can't wait to be on the scouting. Who's the most likely best player I could see on the Gladiators who's in the Preds system right now?
Oh gosh, there's plenty of them. You can go see Luke Prokop, I believe. Isn't he down at ECHL?
Might be.
Jeff? I believe so. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I mean, I mean, there's a lot of. I don't know. It's actually nice to have them to have an ECHL team, even though I cannot pronounce it.
It's not to say
it's been nice because they're not going around to random different teams that they can find, and I don't know. I'm really excited to see how that turns out. I think Jack Mateer as well.
Luke Prokop, Jack Mateer, Nolan Burke.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's plenty there, and they've been doing pretty well too. But before we go, Chase, and I know we need to sign off here, I did want to tell you something interesting, because it wouldn't be a podcast with me if I wasn't trying to teach you guys something. But did you know actually why Pirates have eye patches? I'm dead serious. No. This is really cool. I learned this tonight.
Jeff, don't fall.
No, serious. You guess?
Jeff, don't do this. Why?
Chase, I have to.
Oh no, Jeff,
they couldn't. No. It has to do with they just couldn't afford an iPad. So there you go.
And on that note,
Bryan Bastin, Jeff Middleton, always a pleasure. I'll talk to y'all next week.